20 shocking facts about Jackie Kennedy's wedding. What really happened? The bride was 24. The groom, a United States senator. The press described it as the most brilliant wedding Newport had seen in years. By the morning of September 12, 1953, Hammersmith Farm was already in motion. The Auchincloss estate, selected for its size, seclusion, and social weight, had been transformed overnight into the operational center of one of the most closely watched weddings in the country. White tents stretched across the lawns, flooring was laid, tables aligned, pathways defined. Every element was positioned to receive more than 1,300 guests by early afternoon. Nothing about the morning was informal. Caterers coordinated deliveries, florists finalized arrangements, staff rehearsed movement patterns, where guests would arrive, where photographers would stand, how crowds would be directed once the ceremony concluded. The estate was not preparing for a family gathering. It was preparing for visibility. Reporters arrived early. Newsreel cameras claimed vantage points. Traffic restrictions were already in place across Newport in anticipation of the surge following the ceremony at St. Mary's Church. Even before the bride arrived, the event had begun to draw the nation's attention. Behind it all was Janet Auchincloss. The planning, the pacing, the protocol. These had been settled well in advance under her direction. Guest lists were finalized. Seating was assigned. Access was determined. What would be seen and what would not had already been decided. The wedding's public shape was fixed long before the day itself began. By mid-morning, there was no room for revision. Invitations had been sent. Expectations set. The machinery of the day was already running, indifferent to private feeling. Whatever Jacqueline Bouvier may have been experiencing that morning, the version of her wedding the world would witness was already in place, structured, scaled, and proceeding forward. By the time church bells rang in Newport, Hammersmith Farm stood ready. The stage was set, the audience assembled, and the day would unfold exactly as planned. You're watching Cultured Elegance. If you enjoy thoughtful, deeply researched stories like this one, feel free to like, subscribe, and share. And for early access to new videos and behind-the-scenes work, you can become a channel member. Jackie's wedding dress did not begin as a symbol. At Janet Auchincloss's insistence, the gown was made in New York rather than Paris, despite Jackie's admiration for European couture and simpler lines. The designer chosen was Anne Lowe, one of the most accomplished couturiers in America, whose clients included many of the country's wealthiest families. Despite her extraordinary skill, Lowe's name was rarely printed, and her work was routinely credited without acknowledgement. Jackie specifically selected Anne Lowe, a decision that would later be understood as historically significant. Yet while Lowe designed the gown, final authority over its direction rested elsewhere. The dress was constructed of ivory silk taffeta, using more than 50 yards of fabric. It featured a tightly banded bodice, a portrait neckline, and a full skirt formed from circular, tucked panels. The silhouette was emphatically traditional, structured, formal, and heavy by design. It was meant to signal lineage and propriety rather than individuality. Jackie paired the gown with her maternal grandmother's rose point lace veil, an heirloom that reinforced continuity across generations. The choice was symbolic, anchoring the wedding in family history rather than personal expression. 10 days before the ceremony, the project nearly collapsed. A pipe burst in Anne Lowe's studio, flooding the workspace and destroying Jackie's gown along with many of the bridesmaids' dresses. With the wedding imminent, Lowe and her team undertook an extraordinary effort. Working around the clock, they remade the entire ensemble from memory. Jackie was not told of the disaster until after the wedding. Lowe was determined that nothing disrupt the day. The result was visually striking and deeply conflicted. Though the gown would later be celebrated as iconic, Jackie herself did not love it. She found it overly ornate and physically cumbersome, far removed from the clean lines and understated elegance she preferred. Years later, she would confide to designers she trusted that the dress did not reflect her taste and did not feel like her. Still, she wore it without objection. The wedding demanded compliance, not experimentation. The moment called for tradition over authorship. Jackie understood that her role was to embody the image expected of her, regardless of personal preference. Yet she never forgot Anne Lowe's labor. The dress carried a dual legacy: remarkable craftsmanship achieved under pressure, and the near-total erasure of the woman who created it. Lowe's name was largely absent from contemporary coverage, even as the gown became one of the most photographed wedding dresses of the century. As guests gathered inside St. Mary's Church, one absence became immediately apparent. Jackie's father was not there. John Vernew, Black Jack, Bouvier III did not appear at the church entrance, did not take a place in the front pews, and did not step forward to escort his daughter down the aisle. There was no announcement explaining his absence, and no acknowledgement from the family. People noticed. Among Newport society, where family histories were well known and deviations quietly tracked, the omission prompted whispered questions. Guests glanced toward the doorway, then toward one another. The absence followed them into the pews and lingered through the ceremony. Jackie entered the church on the arm of her stepfather, Hugh Auchincloss. For those familiar with the family's internal divisions, the substitution was unmistakable. For others, it caused confusion. Early press photographs misidentified Hugh Auchincloss as Jackie's father. A caption later corrected with the explanation that Mr. Bouvier had been taken ill. The correction satisfied no one who had been present. What the public did not know that morning was that Jackie herself had not been informed in advance that her father would not walk her down the aisle. The decision had not been hers. Janet Auchincloss had communicated directly with her former husband, making clear that he would not be included in the wedding in the traditional role of father of the bride. The exclusion was deliberate, and it was unilateral. Black Jack was nearby in Newport, but removed from the visible rituals of the day. Whatever private reasoning lay behind the decision, the public result was unmistakable. Jackie's father had been erased from the most ceremonial moment of her life. Inside the church, Jackie did not hesitate. She did not pause at the door. She did not scan the pews. She proceeded down the aisle as planned, composed and forward-facing, offering no indication that anything was amiss. The ceremony moved forward, but the absence did not disappear. It followed the guests out of the church, into the conversations afterward, and into the reception that afternoon. It was noticed, it was interpreted, and it would not be forgotten. The ceremony took place at St. Mary's Church in Newport, Rhode Island, a parish chosen for its Catholic legitimacy and its long-standing connection to Newport's elite families. By the time Jacqueline Bouvier entered the church, nearly 800 guests filled the pews. Outside, crowds gathered along the street, hoping for a glimpse of the bride. Inside, the congregation reflected the convergence of two worlds. The wedding mass was officiated by Archbishop Richard Cushing of Boston, a close ally of the Kennedy family. During the service, a special blessing from Pope Pius XII was read aloud, a rare and deliberate inclusion that underscored the religious and political significance of the match. The guest list made that significance unmistakable. Among those present were Senator Lyndon B. Johnson and Lady Bird Johnson, Adlai Stevenson, members of the Astor and Vanderbilt families, and a wide array of diplomats, political operatives, and Catholic clergy. The Kennedys' political circle sat alongside Newport's old money families, many of whom had known Jackie since childhood. The contrast was visible. Observers later noted a clear divide in the pews. On one side were Newport and New York society, understated in dress, reserved in manner. On the other were the Kennedys and their allies, more assertive in presence, more conscious of the moment's visibility. The wedding was not merely being witnessed, it was being read. At the altar, Jackie and Jack stood before the congregation. When Jackie spoke her vows, witnesses described them as barely audible. There was no theatrical delivery, no attempt to command the room. The service proceeded according to form, measured and formal. Everything about the ceremony communicated intention. This was a Catholic wedding conducted at the highest level. It was a political union presented as moral stability, and it unfolded in full view of the people who mattered most. When the Mass concluded, the guests rose, the cameras followed, and the crowd outside surged forward. The ceremony had done its work. The marriage was now public. If the ceremony established legitimacy, the people present revealed where influence truly sat. The wedding party alone made that clear. Robert Kennedy served as best man. The ushers included Ted Kennedy, Sergeant Shriver, and a large contingent of Jack's closest friends and political companions, Lem Billings, Torbert Toby McDonald, George Smathers, Chuck Spaulding, James Reed, and Ben Smith. Hugh Auchincloss's sons, Usha and Tommy Auchincloss, were also included, as was Charles Bartlett, the journalist who had introduced Jackie and Jack. The imbalance was striking. The groom's side arrived in force, confident, expansive, and unmistakably conscious of the moment. The Kennedys and their allies moved as a unit, filling space and commanding attention. Their presence altered the atmosphere as soon as they entered. On the bride's side were Newport, New York, and Washington society, families accustomed to discretion and understatement. They observed rather than asserted. The contrast was immediate and visible. Eyewitnesses later described the scene in blunt terms. Several recalled the Kennedys arriving like an army. One Washington hostess remembered that the Newport guests were simply dressed, while the Kennedy contingent appeared dressed to kill. Another observer noted the shift on the dance floor, where Kennedy friends in bright suits seemed to dominate the room, their energy overtaking the quieter Newport crowd. Not all of it was dignified. Marion Davies, invited by the Kennedys, became a spectacle of her own. She was visibly drunk, drawing attention and raised eyebrows in equal measure. Her behavior only heightened the sense that the event had become something larger and less contained than Newport custom preferred. The reception at Hammersmith Farm was structured as a formal luncheon rather than an evening feast, a choice that set the tone immediately. Guests were served cold poached salmon, chicken prepared simply, most often described as creamed or presented in salad, along with lobster and other seafood dishes. The accompaniments were traditional: fresh rolls, butter, composed salads. Fruit was served in hollowed pineapple shells, an elegant flourish that signaled effort without extravagance. At the center of the tents stood a grand 5-tier wedding cake, ordered by Joseph P. Kennedy. Its presence was unmistakable, but it was not ostentatious. Like much of the day, it communicated scale and authority rather than warmth. Champagne, cocktails, and wine circulated throughout the afternoon, but the service was measured. There was no sense of indulgence for its own sake. The pacing of the meal was deliberate, designed to keep the event moving and the guests composed. The luncheon did its work. It satisfied expectations, maintained tempo, and left little space for spontaneity, precisely as intended. By the time the reception reached full stride, Hammersmith Farm had been transformed into something closer to a public venue than a private estate. More than 1,300 guests moved across the lawns, beneath a network of vast white tents, erected specifically for the day. The scale alone distinguished the event. Pathways were defined, tables aligned, and sightlines carefully managed to accommodate crowds, press, and constant circulation. The guest list reflected the magnitude of the moment. Among those present were Senate Majority Leader Lyndon B. Johnson and Lady Bird Johnson, former presidential nominee Adlai Stevenson, and members of some of America's most established families. The Kennedys' political circle mixed with Newport society, creating a gathering that felt national in scope rather than familial. Figures from media and entertainment were also visible. Marion Davies, long associated with William Randolph Hearst, attended as a guest of the Kennedys and quickly became a subject of comment for her behavior. Popular singer and radio personality Morton Downey was noted by the press as part of the celebrity presence. Journalists and political intermediaries, including Charles and Martha Bartlett, moved easily through the crowd. The Meyer Davis Orchestra played throughout the afternoon, providing continuity and structure as guests flowed between conversations, photographs, and formalities. Davis's presence tied the event to earlier auchincloss milestones, reinforcing tradition rather than novelty. For the newsreel cameras, moments of charm were deliberately staged. Children were brought forward to perform the Mexican hat dance, a brief interlude designed for visual appeal and press consumption. The scene offered movement and lightness without inviting disorder. The scale impressed everyone present. Amid the scale and choreography, Jackie asserted control in small, deliberate ways. She declined a staged champagne-clinking photograph when prompted by photographers, dismissing it as unnecessary. Throughout the reception, she followed protocol, but avoided theatrical displays of emotion. Within a day defined by expectation, they marked the few moments that remained hers. While the wedding unfolded in public, Jackie's father spent the day elsewhere. John Vernew, Black Jack Bouvier III, was staying at the Viking Hotel in Newport, only a short distance from St. Mary's Church. He had expected to take part in his daughter's wedding in the customary way. Instead, he was informed that he could attend the ceremony, but would not be welcomed at the reception. The message was delivered directly, leaving no ambiguity about his role. In the hours surrounding the ceremony, Black Jack was alone. Witnesses later recalled that he drank heavily. The exclusion was not merely social, it was symbolic. He had prepared himself for months, physically and emotionally, anticipating the moment he would walk his daughter down the aisle. That moment was removed without explanation and without his daughter's knowledge. After the wedding, he was hospitalized. Lee Radziwill would later describe the day as the most painful of her father's life. She remembered him, isolated, humiliated, and fully aware of what he had lost. Of all the people present in Newport that day, she believed he was the one who understood the cost most acutely. The reckoning did not occur publicly. In the weeks that followed, Jackie wrote to her father. In that note, she extended forgiveness, a private acknowledgement of the pain the day had caused him. The gesture was personal and unadvertised, offered without ceremony. Repair elsewhere took longer. Jackie did not immediately forgive her mother for the decision that had excluded her father without her consent. The fracture was not loud or theatrical, but it endured. Trust was altered. Something essential shifted. In public terms, the wedding had succeeded. It had unfolded exactly as designed, but the private accounting did not match the photographs. From that day forward, Jackie understood something she would encounter again and again in her life. Appearances could be managed while damage remained unresolved, and reconciliation would not always be shared evenly among those involved. It was not the last time she would learn that lesson. September 12, 1953, marked more than a marriage. It marked Jackie's public absorption into the Kennedy family. From that day forward, personal choice narrowed, private life receded, and appearance became inseparable from purpose. Decisions would be weighed for consequence, not comfort. The wedding did not create these conditions. It revealed them. What followed, the constraints, the distance, the carefully managed public image, began here. If stories like this matter to you, where history is shaped as much by what is arranged as by what is felt, I invite you to subscribe and become a channel member. New episodes explore individuals behind the photographs, the decisions beneath the pageantry, and the moments that shaped public life long before the headlines. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.